We begin with a warning about anecdotal evidence. Now, an anecdote is a story about an individual event that happened to individual people. Too often, politicians and pundits ask us to draw conclusions about the entire country based upon stories about individuals. This next anecdote that I'm about to tell you from former President Donald Trump is extra special as an example, because this one is an anecdote about an anecdote written by an unidentified author about an unidentified doctor in an unspecified place in South America who himself told an anecdote. And Donald Trump read this. So here's his anecdote. Take a look.
Prisons and mental institutions are being emptied out. I read a story not long ago where a man who takes care of a large segment of people in a mental institution in a South American country, a doctor, sounded like a great man, actually. He said he no longer has anything to do. He used to work 24-hour days. He said, all of our patients have been released into the United States of America.
Folks, we are spending way too much time sitting and listening and making important decisions and voting and basing our entire worldview on the stories that people tell us. We need to be basing our decisions on global data about everything and not stories, a story about this over here or a story about that over there, let alone a story about a thing that happened. Welcome to Freesplain. I am nobody special, and I am here to explain for free how you can free yourself from the politicians and the pundit people who offer you instructions instead of information. The data is out there. You can get it for yourself. Yes, you can. Former President Trump did cite some hard data recently. Who remembers that immigration chart that he was looking at and talking about during that rally when he got that bullet grazed his ear in Pennsylvania? This is that same chart a few days later at the Republican National Convention. You can see he's pretty proud of it.
If that was the chart that saved my life, I said, look it, I'm so proud of it. I think it's one of the greatest. It was done by the Border Patrol.
Made by the Border Patrol. Okay, I don't know if the Border Patrol is in the habit of publishing phrases like also terrorists or nothing like this has ever happened to our country before. I wonder if the former president will ask the Border Patrol about this part here, this big red arrow, indicating that Trump left office in what appears to be May of 2020. According to the United States government, Trump left office on the same day that Joe Biden took office, which is late January of 2021. It's called Inauguration Day. So we can see here, I'm going to put the little marker on the top of the bar here. That was Trump's last month in office, and it was Joe Biden's first. Capping several months running where Trump's numbers were significantly higher than any of the numbers from the Obama years that we see here on this graph. Actually, this chart reminds me of another chart that can be found on the website of Republican Senator Ron Johnson. You can see the similarities there. I can show them to you side by side. You know, we're all about the data here. Flip them back and forth, and you can see that the captions and the arrows are different, but the underlying bar graph data itself is the same. So Trump says this data is from the United States Border Patrol, but the chart itself says Customs and Border Protection. Okay, so what is the difference between Customs and Border Protection and the Border Patrol? This website offers an answer, but I don't know who they are. And we don't just accept answers from the first site that shows up on a Google search, or at least we don't do that here. Let's see if we can find a .gov source, shall we? Here's some. Border Patrol Overview. Let's go there. If you don't have time to wander aimlessly around whimsically designed government websites, fear not, I've been here before. Here's a straightforward summary. So, the Border Patrol works along the country's border between our official border ports. It's part of Customs and Border Protection, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security. At ports of entry, we start seeing references to field operations. The Office of Field Operations, apparently the single largest division of the Customs and Border Protection, manages the ports of entry. Okay, back to Trump's chart. Notably, Republican Senator Johnson's version of the chart has a very different title than Trump's. Instead of illegal immigration into the United States, Johnson's is titled Southwest Border Encounters. Now, when the Department of Homeland Security talks about the southwest border, they're referring to the entire land border with Mexico, as you can see. So, what is an encounter? Some definitions you're going to find are a little bit more detailed and sophisticated than others, but this page on the Customs and Border Protection website here has some fairly straightforward definitions, even if they are from 2022. Okay, so here we can see the Office of Field Operations total encounters and U.S. Border Patrol total encounters. And the footnotes here explain what those two things are. Inadmissibles includes those who got stopped at a port of entry, and apprehension is what the Border Patrol calls it when they catch someone crossing between the ports of entry. So what is this last type of border encounter, the Title 42 expulsion? The Office of Homeland Security Statistics has a glossary here that tells us that a Title 42 expulsion is when an encountered person is expelled expeditiously in the interest of the United States public health to prevent the spread of COVID-19. You remember the COVID national health emergency, right? President Trump declared it in March of 2020. So, is Trump's chart accurate? Well, here's a lovely page of data spreadsheets that we can compare it to. Just download the most recent one. On the top of the list here, open it, and here's the data. So we go to the nationwide encounters at the top, then we expand these rows so you can see the months of each year. Then highlight the southwest border column. I picked a handful of months at random and compared them with Trump's chart, and it appears to match. Do please correct me if you find numbers in this column that don't match Trump's chart. The months on Trump's chart are slightly to the right of the corresponding bar on the chart. You see this? So do keep that in mind. So we've established that this chart is a chart of southwest border encounters. It includes all those hopeful migrants who were found inadmissible at ports of entry or expelled under the Title 42 health emergency, along with those who were apprehended and released into the United States. They're all included in the same totals here. Actually, Senator Johnson has a version of the chart on his webpage that shows how many of them were Title 42 expulsions. As you can see, the vast majority of them occurred under President Biden. We can corroborate this with data straight from the Department of Homeland Security. Here we have the Yearbook of Immigration Statistics here on the Department of Homeland Security website. Take a moment to study the numbers. The data shows us that the Biden administration numbers are just higher in all categories because the Trump administration simply did not see this level of transcontinental migration. Unless you trust Donald Trump and his allies over the Department of Homeland Security, then to call this a chart of illegal immigration into the United States is just not accurate. It's a chart of southwest border encounters is what it is. And it shows both migrants expelled into Mexico and migrants released into the United States.
If you look at the arrow in the bottom,
That's the lowest level, the one on the bottom, heavy red arrow. That's the lowest level of illegal immigrants ever to come into our country in recorded history, right there. Right there. And that was my last week in office.
No, May of 2020 was not Trump's last week in office. His last week in office was 8 months later. And does May of 2020 really mark the lowest rate of illegal immigration in recorded history? Let's take a look at recorded history. Here's the Yearbook of Immigration Statistics again. We've got encounter statistics dating back a century. And as you can see, there are entire years with fewer total encounters. I mean the encounters total for an entire given year that are smaller than Trump's most quiet month during his administration, which of course is May of 2020, the Trump clampdown.
Began. We had the opposite. We stopped the invasion, but the invasion that we stopped was peanuts by comparison to what happened after I left. Look at what happened after I left. They took over our country. We ended all catch and release. We shut down asylum fraud. We stopped human trafficking.
Biden world record illegal immigrants. So Trump blames Joe Biden completely for this increase in recent years in border encounters. Here we have Trump's red marker showing Trump clampdown begins, which marks looks like the middle of his third year, 2019, in the summertime. Over here, this here is Trump's first 10 days in office. This is January of 2017. And here is his first full month, February of 2017. Look at this drop in border encounters. I'm actually surprised that we don't see a red. Does anyone have any theories? I'm serious now as to why President Trump did not put a red arrow here to take credit for this drop in border encounters. But what really jumps out at me on this graph is here in the summer of 2019, or the middle of 2019, after all the campaigning that Donald Trump did on building a wall, getting control of illegal immigration, we have in the middle of 2019 the biggest increase in border encounters that America had seen, well, in any of the previous years on this graph, all the way back to the Bush administration. In 2019, everyone who was promising that building a wall and stricter immigration policies would deter immigration had to eat their words. Here, look at here's a video of Trump's Homeland Security Secretary on September 23rd, 2019.
To give you a sense of the enormous scale of this crisis that we've been confronted with this year, again, in May, it was the third of 4 months of over 100,000 arrivals, 90% of whom were crossing the border illegally. In addition to that modern-day record of 144,000 in May, which was the highest in 13 years in any single month, we had one day of over 5,800 arrivals at the U.S. border in a single 24-hour period. In that week, we had a group of 1,036 migrants cross en masse together and turn themselves in to Border Patrol agents. Of our record apprehensions that month, 72% were unaccompanied children and family units, a stark change in the traditional demographics arriving at our border. And many of these migrants represented Central America's most vulnerable populations, who put their lives in the hands of very violent criminal organizations to make the journey. With those overwhelming number of arrivals, DHS facilities at the border were overcrowded, resulting in some very difficult humanitarian conditions.
2019 ended up becoming the biggest year for border encounters since 2006. So in the midst of this migrant surge in the middle of 2019, the Trump administration was releasing migrants into the interior of the United States well into its third year.
As of next week, we expect to have achieved another milestone, with some humanitarian medical exceptions. no longer be releasing family units from Border Patrol stations into the interior. This means that for family units, what's been the largest demographic arriving at the U.S. border this year, the court-mandated practice of catch and release due to the inability of DHS to complete immigration proceedings with families detained together in custody will have been mitigated.
Of course, we have this much bigger explosion of migrant encounters during the Biden administration. But I feel like we should be at least curious as to what the causes are for all these surges and drops in migration. Here, we see another historic low in what appears to be May of 2020. Now, I wonder if anyone can think of anything other than White House immigration policy that might explain why people might be restricting their travel or sheltering in place instead of moving to you know what, I'm going to let that lie. We work with data here. I think if I have a point here, it's that even looking at this chart provided by Donald Trump, it is clear that regardless of what it is that causes these surges and fluctuations in the migration of people, White House policy alone cannot explain it, and White House policy alone cannot stop it. And if there's one point that I'm pushing here, it's that your understanding of your world and what's true and false should be based upon data, not heroes and gurus and passionate stories or cheering crowds. Data does not come from politicians and pundits telling you what the numbers on a chart mean, as if you can't look at the data and decide for yourself. This is my one message, and let this be the last time you accept advice from some talking head on a screen, okay? My one message is to say unto you that data is created by institutions of people, multiple people, whose qualifications are vetted by multiple people, and who these people double check each other's work. They're transparent about their methods. They're not trying to recruit you onto some sort of a team or a congregation or a political party so that they can get money from you later. And their funding is not going to dry up, and they're not going to be suddenly out of a job just because some boss doesn't like the data that they have found. And this, my friends, is why the federal government actually is a good place to start when you're looking for data. This is key to my core message. If a team of career federal employees suddenly releases a chart or a spreadsheet or a report, and they're suddenly out of a job because some boss doesn't like what the report says or what the data says, folks, that's a scandal. That's news. That's a documentary. In the corporate world of private enterprise, that's Tuesday. So, and also on some topics, the federal government is literally the only institution that even compiles such data. Immigration statistics come from the Department of Homeland Security. I am not aware of any other institution that compiles and curates such data. If you are, I'd very much like to hear who they are and what their methods are. Because without that, folks, we're dealing in gossip and rumor. So, folks, look for data. Examine it for yourself. And now that data becomes your data. The chart becomes your chart. And if someone challenges your data or challenges your chart, you don't have to fall back on your faith and your trust in some leader or guru who handed you that information on a spoon. No, you can simply ask whoever's challenging your data to point at some institution that produces more reliably and carefully researched data. And there's no shame in it. You can, if they do present better data, you can change your mind with no shame, because we're not loyal to the expert. We're not loyal to the leader or his team. We're not even loyal to the data, because we'll dump it in a second, just as soon as we find data that's more carefully and transparently researched. Because it's out there, folks. The data is out there. Take it for your own. That is how you can become an expert at being a layman. I'm nobody special, and this is Freesplain.